people will actually, through some kind of a infusion of a tax, supplemental tax or whatever it might be, is there going to be extra burden on the people around the city that border the lake, or is this going to be a statewide burden, or I can just, to provide additional funding?
I think it's both. First, so in the way that
because if you say you're taking it away from local, at least that burden,
yeah.
Are you going to place it on them in a different manner?
To some degree, yes. I'm not gonna, there would be some tax increment financing on it, on the half mile around the lake, to the extent there are improvements. And those would be after current RDAs. But the overall, that won't really come into play for several years, because I don't think that you're going to get the type of improvements in those property values attributed to the lake until real works get started. But once it does become a more viable recreation and economic driver for the valley, then I think that those could be, somewhat significant, and that's why people would want to live there more than they do now. But initially, the driver will be through state general funds, and so we would be going to the state and asking for, that ongoing money to run the operations and then to run the projects. And part of the problem that we have now is the Utah Lake Commission doesn't have the backing necessary to get bonding to do these projects in a way that you can really make a dent in the lake. But Mayor Frost, does that answer your question?
I think it partially does, as far as, if I'm thinking any of us that surround the lake, similar to what you would say a tax increment, anything that starts going vertical and that increase. So are you proposing that there'll be some kind of land authority, the authority, but zoning and everything, and what might the state be able to grant permission? Will they take over local authority over their own land?
No, so the boundary will be the lake shore. We're not going to fight about zoning or anything like that. Let me tell you a couple of things that we're trying to avoid fights on. We want the boundary to be the lake shore, so that we're not fighting on local zoning things. We're still determining how to deal with any land created within the lake, and that's the piece that I'm how that is determined. I think it would eventually be its own community if that were to happen. And I say that with a big if, because I'm still interested to see, I want to see whether the lake restoration project can happen or not. I think we all are. But in some ways, I think they're very well thought out, but I oftentimes worry that it's too good to be true. And so, I'm not building this I'm trying to build it to be compatible with that, but not to be, that's our only path forward. It needs to be flexible enough if that doesn't happen. And so I don't know that there's going to be residential on the lake if that doesn't happen. It depends on whether it pencils out or not. But you do have to create islands in order to do some of this because of the way that dredged materials and disposing of those dredged materials tends to work, as I understand it.
Brady, I also have a question about funding.
Okay, just 1 second, and then I'll come back to you. Let me just finish answering Mayor Frost. So in terms of land use, I don't anticipate any attempt to dictate to the surrounding cities on land use issues. In terms of, and then I can see Chris Finlinson there. And so one of the things that I wanted to let you know is we're not making any attempt to, one of the priorities of the lake is to protect the property rights or the water rights upstream and downstream. We don't want to mess with those. We're not trying to pick a fight with that. If water is saved by virtue of evaporation, we're not trying to claim those rights. We're not trying to do any, it's really a hold harmless on the water rights. issues. And so if you have questions, and we can talk about that later, Chris, but I wanted to make sure that you saw that. Because I assume.
Okay, I do have a number of questions, including, we can talk later, but I would ask you to consider having a member of the
Before we
board.
get to your questions, let me go to Carrie, and then I'll come back. And Chris, on the water questions, there's a really good chance that I'll defer and ask for some help from water experts to address it, because I know enough about water rights to know that that it's not something that I have a quick answer to. But Carrie, do you have your
Yes,
question?
I just had a question about the funding. So when we say statewide funding, tax-based general fund, is that just for our current Lake Commission budget, or does it also then include the money that is given to DEQ for the water studies? Does it include the carp removal money that we get? Those are types of money that we've been given to outside entities that also in general help the lake. So will those all be combined, or will they remain separate?
I believe that I'm not sure the funding source for each of those. The idea is to make it so that the locals don't have to put in money, and the state would take the place of the local money. Now, if they're getting grants, or if they're getting money from different state agencies to perform those programs, it would largely remain the same. But we're trying to make it so that this is a state level asset and paid for by the state overall. So, Chris, did you have some questions on the water issues? And like I said, there's a really good chance that on your questions, because they're water related, I may need to bring in some help at some point before I have a good answer for you.
Well, I don't think my questions right now, I think we probably should talk later about the water rights and, and that discussion, but there are some other questions I have, but if you want to wait for those and go through your presentation, then I'm willing, then happy to wait until the end.
Well, I think what I'm trying to do is, I don't have a grand presentation. What I'm mostly wanting to make sure is, I'm trying to get a draft out by the end of this week. There's a few more changes that I didn't like the way that they were. And so what I've learned is, if you get the draft out with some stupid things that you already know are stupid, then it's a really bad idea. And so I'm trying to get the stupid out. There may still be some that I don't know about, but I wanted to more just make sure that if there are specific things that you have concerns about, that I understand those, so that I can note those and and make sure that we're addressing that in the bill. And then if there are specific questions, I can answer anything that you have. So if there are other questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Representative, this is Erica Gaddis.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is your intent to also help finance infrastructure that relates to pollutant loading into the lake, or would that continue to be largely financed by cities, ratepayers, sewer bills, stormwater utilities, et cetera? And as you know, our Water Quality Board is financing many wastewater treatment upgrades in the county right now. But is your intent to have this funding source help with that, or would those be left kind of as they are?
Those would largely be left as they are. But I would say this, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because of the impact of the past that not having those in place has had. And I kind of view it as a symbiotic thing, where if we start, we've got some pollutants in, I think it's largely in that first foot of silt on the bottom of the lake. As we start to work through that and do water remediation, it does have a symbiotic effect of reducing the actual impact of wastewater pollutants coming in. We're dealing with that impact, and we're dealing with it consistently. And so and so you may not need to have as much regulation on that wastewater if we're dealing with it effectively within the lake. But obviously we want the water coming in to be clean. But, I think that there's a symbiotic relationship there, where, you start to do a cost benefit analysis of dealing with those impacts when we're dealing with it within the lake, as well as when it's coming in, you may not need, whereas normally if you were just dealing with it coming in, you may need to get to this level. But if we're doing it in the lake to this level, then maybe you only need to get to this level on the wastewater. But that's obviously a lot more down the line, and it will require a lot more, expert analysis to see where that balance is. But I do think that they help each other.
Yeah, and we're just moving into the scenario modeling portion of our study, and certainly, loading from the sediments is an important component of that modeling. So we can run some scenarios that address both of those ideas. But so we should be thinking about the funding as largely for projects in the lake, not so much to fund impacts to the lake from the watershed. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're largely
Okay.
trying, this is meant to be in the lake and not out of the lake as much. The only point that we're going out of the lake is that tax increment financing as a future use of funds. And on the tax increment financing, it's not a bad, we anticipate that if we start to make improvements on the lake, that south and southwest portion that could be developed in the future, that's currently not developed in any real way, that creates a lot of funds for the future on the tax increment financing. And then to the extent that there ever were islands that are within the lake that have increased value, and those would have a significant funding source to help as it moves forward as well. And so it seems like a small thing starting out, but if we're going to make big improvements, that becomes a really effective source of income. And the people that are, the tax increment financing, the idea is, unless we help them increase the value of their lands, then, we don't really get any of that benefit. So.
Okay, one last question, and then I'll mute. And I actually have to jump on another committee hearing this morning.
I think Brian had a question, so we'll go to Brian next.
Let me just, as a point of order, I would say that if you're a member of the commission, I would like to hold the discussion amongst the commission, and then we'll have a public comment period following this. And so, Brian, we've been virtual for a while. I'm just asking if you are a member of the commission.
Yes.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hold on. Erica had one.
Erica, yeah. Go ahead, Erica.
Really quick, is it your intent that those two governor appointed seats would be DEQ and DNR, or to be determined? And if not, what's your expectation for how DEQ and DNR would interact with this new authority? Maybe that's not a quick question.
It would be up to the governor on who it would be. I do think that one of them is, there's a really good reason to have someone environmental on it, and there's a really good reason to have someone on from GOED on it. But I'm going to let the administrative agencies fight it out for themselves. And so you guys can lobby the governor on who wants to be on it most. So yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I'm from Payson, and we're one of the outlier cities. We've been on this commission for quite some time. It looks like this commission will go away. You'll start something new, and some of these outlier cities, most of them will be not in the picture anymore. Is that correct?
I don't think that's fully correct. I don't think that they would have, well, I would say this, if the outlier cities want to assert their voice, it would largely be through the COG appointees. And that was the intent of having the COG appointees, so that there's some spot for it. But some of it is also just how big of a board can you have before it struggles to function effectively? This is a 13-member board as it's set up now. Do we go to, if we were to, how many are on the Utah Lake Commission now? Is it, Eric, can you tell me what that is?
21.
Yeah, that's a big board, and that gets a little bit unwieldy. And so Brian, I'm not going to say that the outlying cities will have this, the exact board seats that they have on the current, but it would largely be through the COG appointees. So.
Thank you.
Would
Can
we
I ask-
still have the, this is a question for Eric, would we still have the technical committee, or would that be
That was a question I
disbanded?
had as well. Yeah.
I think that it could, if the board wanted a technical committee or something, other things to help them function, I don't think that there's anything that would prevent them from doing that.
So one additional question, this is Jeff
Yes.
Hastings with Linden. Did you mention Linden as part of that governing board?
I did not. How much, well, let me,
Well, we have the Linden Boat Dock Harbor there that our property goes right into the lake. So
how much property is within the, other than the boat dock, how much frontage is there on the lake for Linden? As I recall, it was pretty minimal.
well, it is minimal, but it is property. So, I mean, we have the transfer station there that adjacent to it that goes up. So there is an extended part of property that attaches to the lake. So,
Well, the idea was we're trying to get as much, the 5 cities that had an automatic board seat was largely because of the amount of private land adjacent to the lake that had already been developed. There are numerous cities that touch into the lake and they don't all automatically get a board seat. And so I know that Linden may not love that. But if I do think that Linden would have a very good claim with regards to going through the council of government seat to get one of those in most years.
Is there any other questions at this point? I have a couple, but I'll reserve them. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering, Representative, if you would consider, well, a couple of things. One, I think it was vitally important with the nature of the usage of the lake that you have a water right holder on the board. I think that's critical. It's just so important to the operation of not only Central Utah, but other water entities that I think we need to have some representation there. Another question, would you consider postponing or passing a study resolution, put some money into it so that you could really get some definitive information on the very nature of the lake? What kind of geologic stuff is on the bottom of the lake? I have heard estimates for anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 feet deep. And these are from very knowledgeable people. So to really get going, and I appreciate the folks who are pushing this other project. It sounds wonderful. And as you say, to me, it sounds almost too good to be true. We're right in agreement on that. But I think before going too far down that road, that we really need to know what the basic nature of that lake is, not what is being told to us by by developers, but by some good scientific and probably 2 or 3 different studies to really know what we're dealing with before we launch into it. I'm just a little bit concerned, and forgive me for being somewhat of a cynic, but rarely does the state come to us and say, let us help you with your issues and we're going to give you some money, unless they have something that they want to get in return. And so I just would kind of be interested in knowing what you feel like that is, and why. I know you mentioned that you think the state is in a better position. Well, that's true, but our legislature always says they would like to maintain local control when they talk about the federal government. And that's a good byline until it comes to state issues. And then we kind of feel like the state, and I've been there, I understand. And so I'm pointing the finger back at myself here also, but I'm just a little bit skeptical and suspicious as to why we need state involvement of a sweeping nature to really take over on this.
Chris, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Who owns the lake?
The state of Utah does.
Okay. Do any of the cities own the lake?
No,
Okay. Just
They do not.
extend beyond the boundaries of the lake.
What's that?
Should the cities be paying for something that they don't own? That is not within their political jurisdiction?
Probably not, but they do have a right to be able to control up to the shoreline, and what the impact that it has on their city is of vital importance to the cities.
So let me ask this. Well, this isn't coming from the state asking for something. It's not. It's coming from the fact that I think that the Utah Lake Commission cares deeply about the lake, and I don't think they've had a big enough shovel to make a dent in the problems with the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the legislators from Utah County were looking at what we could do to help our county, it became pretty obvious that it was the lake that that I think the state has taken far too passive of a role and has not taken that stewardship to care for the lake seriously. And it's time for them to step up. This is not being driven by, something where we're trying to take anything. We haven't gone into anyone's jurisdiction to land use control. We haven't, this is a state asset, and it's time we stepped up and took care of it. And if you feel like the Utah Lake Commission has the tools and the
Cowie.
to, I think, Mayor Acerson, you're still live. If you feel like since 2007, the Utah Lake Commission has been able to act in a way that they can really make a dent on the issues of the lake, then I simply don't agree. I think they've tried and they've done the best they can, but they don't have the shovel needed. And I'm trying to get you a bigger shovel on that. In terms of, let's see, you had you had a couple of other issues on it.
Well, I'd like to see a representative from the water community, water users have a seat on the authority commission, whatever we have. I think that's important.
If the commission is tasked with maintaining the water rights upstream and downstream and not impacting them as one of their core tasks, and they don't have water rights themselves, can you tell me why?
Because of the critical nature to the operation of our water systems.
Okay.
And it's a different voice that I think is important that is heard.
Would the water systems be willing to contribute money to help with the funding of the lake?
We do now.
I know. Would you be willing to continue, and would you be willing to or increase that funding to assist with it?
I think we would certainly be willing to participate to the level that the other participants, other members of the authority do.
It's something that we can look at. I do worry about getting the board just too big.
And that's certainly understandable.
And
but I do think the importance of the lake as part of our water system is an issue that we need to be very careful with.
And I don't disagree. I'm just not sure that can't be served by the board in any event. And so I'm happy to discuss it and talk about whether or not it would or not, and how that would be helpful. But a lot of it is, as much as possible, I'm trying to keep this board locally controlled, as you talked about. This is a very heavily locally controlled board. And and if we're going to expand the board in that way, it decreases the local control as well. And so, are there any other questions?
I have one. So as you talk about this shovel, the bigger shovel that you might have, and it does need money. There's no question about it to tackle a lot of elements. Is there going to be an appropriation from the state this year, and will it be an ongoing appropriation, or is it just a one-time money, or is it somewhat in perpetual in nature that will receive that funding from the state?
So what I anticipate is a larger one-time this year, and then an ongoing that would likely exceed, well, I think it almost certainly would exceed what the state is currently, or what the Utah Lake Commission is currently receiving for their operations.
Okay.
Now, the exact amount comes down to the budget process, and that's going to be ongoing through the end of session as far as, where that lands. I'm obviously going to try to go and get as much as we can for it. But I do believe that it would exceed the funding that we currently have. And not only that, but this opens up the ability to use the state's credit and the state's resources for grants and programs that are currently not available to an interlocal commission. So, for example, the EPA has a wastewater remediation program that provides for a $250 million loan without, that's basically an interest-free loan. And I don't know that we could do 250, but if you have a certain amount of state matching funds and you can use different things around the body that impact it, but you need a sponsoring state entity that helps with going out and getting those kinds of funds and those kinds of programs, where the Utah Lake Commission has a lot more, they're limited in their ability to do that.
Okay. I might just pick your brain on when you talk about TIF. I understand how it works. And so as a city that has a lot of the shoreline, that vertical development that through time, I guess, as the lake improves, it's going to make it more desirable to live by, perhaps do business. And so it feels like if you're going to do a TIF, at that point, you are removing revenue from the cities that surround it. It's going to be a shared revenue source. Is there a percentage that you're thinking about that here's the, how do you see that being structured?
That would largely be structured by the board, and that would be, the board would be choosing those rates. And so I'm not, so, one of Chris's questions that I didn't get to, and I apologize that I didn't, Chris, was you talked about, can we do a study to study this more and that kind of thing. I don't think, I do think we can, but I don't think that forming the Utah Lake Authority as opposed to the Utah Lake Commission precludes that study. The authority would be performing that study. They would be intimately involved, and those decisions as to the best way and the schedule and everything related to that lake remediation would be under the authority of the Utah Lake Authority. Those decisions related to tax increment financing and the rate on the tax increment financing, those would be within the authority of this body. And so, I'm not trying to prescribe how the lake will be fixed and what this authority will do precisely. I'm trying to create a structure that maintains enough flexibility and has enough power to actually do something and go out and get the resources to do something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think too, just being local government, whenever you have development that might be dynamic or nature or something that is worthy of a TIF, it typically takes a great deal of infrastructure that we provide to those developments. And through that infrastructure, it's very likely that we would rely on an RDA ourselves just to get basic services to these areas. I see there might be a competition in that, and especially if that tool is taken away from us in that general area or that half a mile beyond or wherever this is. I have not seen the map, and then the legislature started. So that might be a tool that we need to get infrastructure to the very people that are going to live near there.
So if you go to the code and you look up MIDA, M-I-D-A, it's a military group that has tax increment financing, and they regularly negotiate with RDAs to work those issues out. so that so they can figure out, you know, so that there's not too much stacking, things like that, with regards to the TIF. And so that's a very similar model. And in fact, that's the model that I told the bill drafter to use, was the MIDA TIF model for that half mile around the lake. And so if you do have specific questions, I'd recommend that you go to that section of the code. I think that I'll have the draft out to all of you by the end of the week, but there were some, there's just a few issues to work through before I can release it. But I think that, you know, in terms of how that interacts, that's pretty common that you're negotiating with an RDA for those areas, and you can, and there's quite a few workarounds on that, Mayor Frost.
Right. Other questions from the commission members?
Ryan has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm not looking up. Ryan.
Representative Brammer, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been really interesting. As we've talked in the past, you know that the state has a variety of ongoing activities, specifically through Department of Natural Resources, which is, you know, where I work. And I'm curious on how this authority will interact with those ongoing activities. We've got current projects from Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. We've got current projects from DWR on a variety of habitat restoration pieces, as well as Division of Water Resources. And I'm curious if this authority supplants those, if it takes management of them. I'm just trying to figure out how we play in this.
You know, for each of those, I'm not familiar with each of those projects to the extent that I can answer for each individual project. So just keep that in mind. But
and Representative, I wouldn't expect you to be. I'm just trying to figure out how we best engage on this.
I think that it would largely be, you would still, so currently you engage with the Utah Lake Commission as you go through those programs. I don't think that there'd be a whole lot different in that way. You know, the Lake Authority would be the controlling authority on the lake, but they're almost certainly looking for every bit of help and interaction with your department and with Erica's department in order to continue the process of improving the lake, which I think, you know, I don't think that a lot changes in effect overall. But as you know, as you look at the language, you know, you're going to know a lot better than me looking at the language as to how that impacts your specific programs. So when that comes out, come talk to me, because I'm happy to, if there's something that you have specific concerns about. And what I will probably do is I'm going to circulate the protected draft to everyone on the Utah Lake Commission. What that means is you can't forward it to other people. It will go to you, and I want you to look at it, and you can have your attorneys look at it, that kind of thing. Get back to me with any concerns as soon as you can, because we are in the session. And so I have to move pretty quickly on getting this before committees and letting the public know about it. But before I release it to the public, it's a lot easier if you tell me your concerns and I can make those changes right off the bat than before it goes public. So I'll send that out to everyone because I want to know where your concerns are, and to the extent that I can address them, I will. And then when I send that out, I'll probably let you know the deadline that I need them back by so that I can get the bill drafter prepped to make any changes that you have.
I have some real reservations right now. This is a substantial change to the lake as we know it. Here we are in the session has began. We don't have the bill in front of us. It's coming to us. Please make really quick edits. Get it back to me. So I'm going to appeal to you right now, if you would just consider going through this process next year to have time to digest this whole thing and how it'll affect each community collectively, Utah County. We've been running really well as a commission to date. With what little we get, we make the best of it. And I'm just thinking, how could I pursue something like this within my city? And I don't have anything for you. You're going to have a week to get edits, and we're going to vote on it. it's not consistent, and to me, it's not transparent. And I'm not a naysayer. I'm not trying to be skeptical. I'm just trying to think good governance has transparency. We're talking, that's great. But having a copy of that and having us review it, I think the mayors ought to see it, all of the mayors, and just if there's nothing to hide, which I don't believe you do, but I do think that there's some real wisdom in pumping the brakes and preparing this for the next session. We're already hamstrung with COVID and some of the restrictive elements to interface with legislatures and staff. And so I'm going to offer that as one question, and then I'm going to ask a second one, and that is the current commission as it stands. To dissolve it, it takes 75% of basically of the membership to do that internally. Do you see that the state has the ability to just dissolve it on its own without notice to us, or at least without any kind of input that we have or a vote that we have as a current commission as it's been established?
Sure. So I'll take both of those. On the second issue, the short answer is yes. The Utah Lake Commission was formed by joint resolution through the House and the Senate in 2007. To the extent that it was formed by the state, it can be dissolved by the state.
Okay.
On the transparency issue, we're not trying to be, have a lack of transparency. It's,
I stated that it,
and that, I've been trying to get this draft done since the beginning of last session because I wanted to get it out to everyone. And I understand the concerns. I hope that you'll give it a good read and try to look through it. The concern that you're going to have is we have some one-time money and we have bonding and we have tools to get money and resources to the lake this year. I can't make that promise next year. And so you're likely walking away from several millions of dollars on resources that go to the lake by delaying it a year at the minimum. We've got, because we've been setting up for years to do a larger bond, and that moves a lot of things out of the immediate general fund and frees up one-time money. And I wish that I'd been able to get it out to everyone a little bit sooner, but I will say that you're walking away from a significant funding possibility for the lake that probably moves things forward by 5 to 10 years. Well, more than 5 to 10 years based on your current funding. And we've got a good coalition that's willing to move and get resources to the lake. So I can understand the concern. I don't think that it's a concern that should be taken lightly, because I think it's a significant one. But
have you got in your mind what that allocation might be? Because as things play out and money gets pulled in different directions and it's not what we think it's going to be, you have the ability to pull back and study this for you. Again, pump the brakes. What dollar figure are you considering? What's the ask?
Hey, I think you need to come up to the legislature more, because giving you how the sausage will ultimately be made. Ultimately, there's even if I get the appropriation, then it goes to our executive appropriations group. Now we have good representation on that group that's willing to go and fight for the lake. And we have our leadership team in place, that with some good Utah County representation to push for it. We have a speaker that understands the issue and that wants to push things to the lake. And we have a lieutenant governor and governor who have expressed a desire to push more resources to the lake through this process. So I'm just saying, you've got to strike while the political iron is hot. And I can't tell you the exact amounts. I'm going to ask for a lot, but it will likely be whittled down through the process as it does get pulled side to side. But I would say that it's going to be better than it would likely be better than what you've received in the past. And making a representation beyond that is probably irresponsible on my part, as far as an exact figure. but that's, you've got some good wind at your backs to get something done politically, that I don't know will be there in the next few years.
I have a couple of questions. One is, with the one-time funding, do you have to have this new commission in place to get the one-time funding, or could we get that without that? And also, would this new commission have the authority to dictate to the cities for their sewer plants and how much particulates and things like that? Because that will be going into the lake, and will they have that authority?
On the second issue, they don't have that authority. That's largely Erica's deal, not this entity's. Their authority is to try to clean up the lake. It's not necessarily to dictate to the sewer districts on it. As far as the one time, we could try. We tried last year and we got some, and I think we'll probably be able to get a lot of the Wakara Way stuff either way. It's beyond that makes it a little bit harder, and it's a lot easier package to sell altogether, whereas the Lake Commission is not necessarily able to take advantage of some of the other things that can be done for the lake, and that you can tie one-time money into doing. So that's kind of part of this.
You're saying it's kind of a legal process? I mean, because it is, as we've stated, it is owned by the state of Utah, but the mechanism of interlocal and the Lake Commission is structured, prohibits our representation for fighting for the lake, as we've stated.
I don't think it necessarily prohibits, but I think it makes it much harder. And you've got to have, I don't think it's you're not able to go after things that you otherwise could as easily.
But it's not impossible.
In some instances, I believe it is, but not in all instances.
All right. Other questions from members of the board?
One real quick one, Mayor. Representative Brammer, if you could clarify who can see that bill language when you send out that email, or you could pass that kind of a paragraph on to me that I can disseminate to the board so that they're comfortable with sharing it with their legal teams and so forth, that would be great.
Yeah, so any of the members of the Utah Lake Commission and the attorneys of the organizations that they represent. And then if there's a specific person that you feel like you really need to have take a look at it, then let Eric know, and I can release it to them. And then we'll make whatever changes are possible. And I know that everyone wants to be able to look at a piece of legislation for a year. I see a few former legislators on here. Chris is a former legislator, Craig Peterson. Touch base with them and see if that's, how common that is. And I mean, unfortunately, this is the way, I'm not trying to, but it moves pretty quickly, and the bill drafts come out during the session, and that's pretty standard. And I know it's a big change, but that's, and I've tried to avoid that, but this is kind of more par for the course than I would say otherwise on most legislation, despite our efforts up to the contrary.
I have a question about sharing this. Can we share it with our mayor and city manager?
If you ask Eric to release that to the, if we can release it to the mayor and city manager, I will probably say yes, but I want to try to keep it to this group and your attorneys unless there's a specific request otherwise.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to be a little redundant and we'll move on to the general comments if there's anybody that has it. And that would be paraphrasing. I think that you're saying we're going to strike while the iron's hot. I'm saying I would like to think maybe we could pump the brakes and have a broader discussion, bringing more people into this, our mayors, our council, other people that have real, interest in the lake. If there is not a significant financial component when the sausage is made and there's not enough sausage, would you consider pulling the bill?
Probably not.
And why is that?
Because
If one of the leading elements is money and one-time money, why would we not want to kind of take a step back and reorganize and just have a better transparent process?
So Mayor Frost, it's not just money. I don't think that the Lake Commission has the tools or the ability to solve the problems on the lake. And I believe this gives us a better chance, regardless of money. Now I'm going to go out and try to get money for this, but I don't think that we wait another year and have the lake continue in the state that it's in. And I think that this gives us a better chance to address the problems on the lake. And so that benefit still outweighs virtually anything else that we're trying to do on it.
Okay, could you describe the other tools outside of money?
I mean, I have several times.
That we currently don't have.
Mayor Frost, why don't we talk offline? I don't want to get into an argument about it online.
I'm not arguing.
It's very clear that it doesn't really, it feels that no matter what comes out, that you have made up your mind.
Oh, no, I have not. I have absolutely not.
Well, I'm saying that it feels that way. And so, take a look at what comes out.
Okay.
Let me know what your concerns are so that I can address them. And, this is like a lot of legislation. I anticipate that this will be several years where we continue to work on it. But, if you do it over, it's going to be a heavy lift no matter what. But, I think that ultimately, if you feel like the Lake Commission can solve the problems of the lake, or if you have a better way to do it, I'm all ears. But I'm trying to create a system that has a chance to solve it. Yeah, Carrie.
So I think that we are all on board with the idea of having a more sustainable way to for positive impact on the lake. I think that's a good sign. I think what Mayor Frost is saying is it seems a little bit rushed, but I know for you've been working on it for a few years. We have talked in the past about this. The question I have is if you're going for one-time money, how sustainable is this Lake Advisory Board or I can't remember what you called it, but how sustainable is that? Or would that board need to be going back to the legislature every year and requesting the funds to stay alive? Or would this be as a state asset, if this would be then put in as a regular ongoing project? Or how long would we have to wait? We know we can't hold future legislators accountable for doing one-time money every year. And
No.
so where is your long-term plan with this?
No, there's both a one-time money component and an ongoing component. And I believe that the ongoing will exceed what's currently being contributed to the Utah Lake Commission. So that's going to be a little bit bigger than what it is now. But then the one time, I think we can get a lot more than we otherwise could with this. And so we've been talking about the one time, but there would be an ongoing that would exceed what, and then we can go and fight to get that increase, the ongoing. We can also go and get other projects that feed into this. And, the Lake Authority, I'm sure that you've seen that the Lake Commission, they do a study, they send it to the legislature, and we try to get money back in connection with those studies. And that's pretty common. And that would be future one-time requests that we can do on behalf of the Lake Authority. But there would be an ongoing component on this. So.
Any other questions? Representative Brammer, I apologize if I've appeared to be adversarial. I'm probably a little bit more curious and passionate, but certainly not adversarial. So, all right, is there any other questions? I'm just gonna, again, board member or commission members only at this point. Okay. I'm not seeing hands. If I'm not seeing your hand, Joe, go ahead and just speak. Okay. Seeing none, is there anything else you'd like to add in a conclusion of this, Representative Brammer?
I think keep your minds open. Ultimately, this, the members of the Utah County Commission have made this their top priority, or the Utah County Caucus have made this their top priority for our caucus. And largely because they see the opportunity that's there. And I know that there's a desire to wait on things all the time, but if we wait too long, it delays the opportunity, and we lose some level of opportunity that is there this year that may not be there in the future. And so that's really what I would say on it.
Okay, all right. All right, we'll move on to item number 3, and that would just be a review of the upcoming meetings.
Mayor, can I just ask Brady one more question? So
Sure.
if this is the top priority for our whole caucus, have they all seen the draft, and would we be willing to, are we able to call them and speak to each of our own representatives about this proposal?
They know the guidelines of what's being proposed, and they'll get the draft the same time that you do.
Okay.
And you're welcome to call and talk to them about it and everything that way and raise any concerns.
Right.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Frost.
Somebody else, yes.
Mayor Frost.
Craig, if I could, we're going to have a public comment period for members outside of the commission.
Yeah, the only question I had was I wanted to make sure that on the list of who's approved to receive a copy of the bill, Salt Lake City owns 36,000 acre feet of water rights within the lake, and would like to make sure that they are on that approved list to receive a copy of the draft bill, as well as Provo River Water Users Association, which is a major contributor to the lake.
Sure. Craig, why don't I'll circulate one to you, and if you can keep that to their directors and attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, again, on the agenda, it shows the upcoming meetings, March, July, June 17th, September, and December. Okay.
Mayor Frost, I think Denise Anderson had her hand raised.
Denise, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at a hand. Sorry, Mayor.
You're good. That's what I'm checking for.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. No, so my question is, once we have our attorneys look at this draft, how do we get back together to discuss what our attorneys have advised the cities, to do, or their opinions on this? How are we going to get back together and discuss that?
Okay, good question. I think as the chairman of board, I would be very willing to have another similar meeting as we have looked at this in its totality. The question I would have is, Representative Brammer, would you be willing to attend that as we kind of look at this in greater detail?
To the extent my schedule allows, I'm happy to attend. It gets a little crazy this time of year, but if it may be an odd time or something for me to be there, but I
think we could, with Zoom, I don't have any problem having in something in the evening or something where we can just be in our homes. So if you'll agree to that, we can do that. Thank you, Mayor, for that perspective.
Thank you.
And if there's any feedback, please feel free to email myself, Mayor at AmericanForkCity.gov or AmericanFork.gov, and or Eric, and we'll kind of coalesce.
Yeah, if you guys can try to direct stuff, kind of funnel it through either Eric or Mayor Frost, and then that'll allow me to, if you do have concerns, before we meet, let's try to get those to those guys so that I have a heads up on it, on what I can change or not, and respond as to why. That way I can, it's a little more effective. And so just get them to them as soon as you can. And yeah.
Probably just to be clear, and Eric, we could say, maybe just put Eric and I both in this email. And that way I'm not saying, what did you get, Eric? And I got this. If we're included both, that would be very helpful. Okay, any other?
Representative, you said you're going to be sending us this tomorrow, Friday, or the following Friday?
I'm hoping tomorrow, but
Okay.
if not, it will be as soon as I can. I'm waiting for the next draft to come out, and that's one that I think will have the changes that takes out some stuff that I didn't like, that I knew you guys wouldn't like, and that, you know, that it wasn't right. And so I'm hoping to have that out soon, but I'm at the mercy of a bill drafter. And so I'll get that out as soon as I can and to everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll now move on to item number 4 is general comments from the public. I'm looking at there's 33 participants. I would just say we'd like to limit the timing to, let's just say 2 minutes for the sake of time. And if you'd please state your name. This is not, in my opinion, is not a Q&A. It's just the ability to make a comment, and they will be noted. So is there anybody that would like to make a comment? I'm going to ask Sam to see if there's hands. Please raise your hand, and Sam, if you just let me know. Well, when I say hands, I'm thinking of Mickelson. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me participate in this meeting, and maybe I'll step out of the box and give a different perspective. First of all, everybody keeps talking about some project that's in play that's going to clean the lake up. The only one that I know of is removing the carp, and that's been going on for more than 10 years, and that has not cleaned the lake. If you're talking about the Utah Lake Water Quality Study, we have multiple people trying to input information that's been doing all these studies. All that study is going to do is give us the amount of load that can go into the lake from the waste treatment plants. There's no, definitive what and how the lake's going to be and what it's going to be. So if you take that information, that'd be useful and helpful. And Forest Fire and State Lands and Timpanogos Special Service District is putting in money to see if we can throw all of our assets and knowledge to do stuff. Can we improve the lake? That study is underway right now. Is that achievable? So again, let me step out of the box. It sounds like to me that Utah Lake is a reservoir, and you need to look at it as building a dam and changing the depth of the lake. It's going to change the land of the lake. Maybe you ought to study that, because it's the drinking water, the agricultural water, the recreation use of the water, all the state of Utah. It's been mentioned many times that this is the asset of the state. You already have the things in place, entities, departments, and so forth that look over this already. And a lot of this stuff is going on right now. And it sounds like you're going to create an entity that has the ability to bond and create a 13-member board. That's what I deal with on a daily basis with my district that I have. So if you're going to create an ongoing funding source of bonding and taxation and also assess fees, it sounds like that you don't need to rush this. You're going to be able to take that and implement those things. So I think it's going to come down to the water rights and how are you going to use the state of the land? Are you going to make the lake deeper, so that it represents a reservoir? And if so, you should get that funding to make it a reservoir, to make it deeper so that you lose less water. So I would just reaffirm that we already have the state departments in place to overlook this. And if you want to have a taxation type of entity, then you should do that and look at it more as a reservoir instead of a lake, because it is no longer a lake. Just that's what I have right now, because you got to make sure you maintain the Clean Water Act and not rearrange and redo all the things that are already in place at the state level. So, and then utilizing local representation to run it, I think still a viable way to go. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other comments? Again, I'm not seeing hands, and when I say hands, they would be virtual hands. Or David Bunker.
Yeah, there's a lot of information here that I think some of the board members, certainly some of the other participants, have heard for the first time. With the creation of this Utah Lake Authority and this draft legislation, I think it would be helpful to get the boundary map, exactly where this is located, what it would entail, if it does include areas of cities that border the lake, at the same time as we get the draft legislation, so we know really what it affects. And so that would be a request.
And just so you know, I have presented on this issue to the Utah Lake Commission in the past.
Great. And so maybe they can share that boundary that this draft legislation covers. That would be great if
We
Eric,
could
if you could share that.
take what you did a while ago. It was pre-COVID. I don't know what date. Did we have a boundary in that one, Representative Brammer?
I don't think that had a boundary. I mean, it would be a half mile from the lake shore. I mean, I guess if you want to, I mean, I don't have an engineer with me to do that map, but I think that's, yeah.
Okay.
We can get that a half-mile map made for you.
Okay. All right. Other questions or comments? I shouldn't say questions, they're comments. Okay. You seen any hands up, Sam, virtually? I'm not seeing them up in hands. Okay. Well, this is a work session, so we do not need a motion to adjourn. So I will just adjourn the meeting. So thank you very much, Representative Brammer, for being here, and for everybody that has participated in watching this, and we'll stay close. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Here, goodbye.